I'm not sure if there's such a thing as the best chocolate chip cookie, but I have a recipe that comes pretty close, and we're gonna make it today. Okay, so I know there's no such thing as the best chocolate chip cookie or a perfect chocolate chip cookie. There are thousands of variations of this classic recipe out there in the world, and there is absolutely no way you could pick a best or a perfect. But there are preferences that people have, and I created this recipe to be pretty close to perfect for my preferences, but it's darn good, and I think you'll like it too. I got the base of the recipe from this book from King Arthur Flour, their Cookie Companion Cookbook. It is an awesome book. It's got thousands of cookie recipes, including some essential recipes for some basic cookies, including the chocolate chip. They include two essential recipes, one that is a chewy version and one that is a crispy version. I'm a chewy gal, so I chose the chewy recipe to create this perfect for me cookie recipe. So I'm going to show you how to make this today, and I'm going to share some cookie making tips along the way that I've learned as I've made lots and lots of cookies throughout the years. So the first major change that I did with this recipe, and probably the major change I did with the recipe, was I swapped some chocolate for some nuts because I love a nutty cookie. And I swapped some wheat flour for some almond flour, hoping to increase the nuttiness even more through the flour. And the first thing we're going to do is toast our nuts. And if you've seen any of my baking recipes before, you know this is a must. You must toast your nuts. You get a great flavor as those oils come out in a very crispy, crunchy, awesome texture. The same with this almond flour. Toasting it is going to bring out those natural oils, get it nice and golden brown and toasty flavor. And so it's just going to add a nice depth of flavor to our dough. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in at 350 for about 7 minutes. But I'm going to check this after 5 because I want to make sure that we don't burn the flour. Okay, so my nuts have been toasted, and I chopped my hazelnuts and my pecans pretty roughly. There's a combination of larger chunks and smaller chunks in here. And I just really wanted to make sure that at least the hazelnuts were pretty much all halved at least. So that's what we got here. That took about 7 minutes. And we also toasted the almond flour. This actually took 12 minutes in the 350-degree oven. It started out super, super pale, almost white, and now it is a nice golden brown color, almost the color of a graham cracker. So we're going to set this aside for now, and we're going to measure out our flour. I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between weighing your ingredients and measuring your ingredients with a cup measure. For baking, I've transitioned to pretty much weighing my ingredients whenever possible. And that's because with baking, accuracy really matters. With cookies like these, for instance, too much flour can make your cookies really dry, and it also cause them to not spread the way that you want to spread. So let's take a look at the difference in weight when I measure flour two different ways. So the first way I'm going to do it is I'm just going to scoop my measuring cup into the bin, kind of pack it in there, and go up the side. That is 5.3 ounces. 5.4, just bounced to 5.4 ounces. Okay, so let's do that same thing. And I know that when King Arthur Flour puts their measurements in an ingredient through sort of cup measurements, this is how they weigh out their flour. I know this because I took a class there, or several classes there. They basically gently sort of sprinkle the flour into the measuring cup. And then they level it off with a knife. Now let's see how much this weighs. That is 4.3 ounces. So you can see we got an extra ounce of flour depending on which way we went with measuring out our flour. And we don't want to have too much flour in there. So for this recipe, it calls for 5.5 ounces. So I'm going to kind of put the rest of that in my bowl. I did measure this out for measuring with a cup. So in case you don't have a scale, but I did that King Arthur flour method where you sprinkle it in the cup. So it should be less flour in ounces per cup than if you pack it in. And I'll put that in the recipe below. But really, if you're going to do a lot of baking, get a scale. They're inexpensive and super accurate. We don't need this flour until a little bit later. So I'm going to put this back here and we will get to our wet ingredients. Okay, so I have my stand mixer with my paddle attachment, and we're going to go ahead and cream our wet ingredients. We're going to start with butter and sugar. There's dark brown sugar and granulated sugar in here. Now, here is another tip for baking. You want almost always, unless the recipe says otherwise, you want to have room temperature ingredients. What that means is your butter, you can kind of put an indentation here. It shouldn't be melty, but it should be soft. And you should take your butter out like 4 hours before you're going to bake with it. And if you didn't do that, I have had luck putting the butter into my microwave on defrost, kind of at 5-second increments, just until the butter gets to that softness. You do not want it to melt. But if you keep a close eye, you can kind of get your butter up to temperature pretty quickly. And we're going to put the sugar in. Now the next tip with baking cookies is that you pretty much always want to cream your butter and sugar for a lot longer than you think you're going to want to. You're going to want to make sure that this mixture gets super, super fluffy and light, and that's going to take 5 to 7 minutes. Most people are going to want to stop after 2 minutes. Just keep going. I'm going to show you what this looks like when it is ready. Now, about halfway through beating, you're going to want to scrape down the sides of your bowl and your paddle attachment. This is just to make sure that you're getting all of your butter and sugar incorporated and that you don't have any non-fluffy chunks in your batter when we add the rest of the ingredients. You might want to do this twice even. We're going to keep going. Okay, so we've been about 6 minutes, and you'll see that this is a very pale tan color. And when we started, it was much darker because of that dark brown sugar. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for this to get nice and pale and super soft and whipped feeling. So this is pretty good. Okay, now we're going to add our eggs, and I'm going to crack this on a flat surface and then put it into a little container before putting it into our batter, just to make sure that there's no shells and that the egg's okay. And we're going to do this one at a time, waiting until the eggs are the first egg is incorporated before we put the second egg in. And for this creaming, I have my mixer on medium-high speed, which is what you want. Okay, now this recipe calls for a few other things. We have some corn syrup. We have some apple cider vinegar. And we have our baking soda, baking powder, and salt. We're also going to add a tablespoon of vanilla. And a half a tablespoon of almond extract. That was one of my tweaks to bring out more almond flavor because I love that. And then we're going to get this going again until it is all incorporated and combined well. I combined our almond flour and our all-purpose flour, Gave that a little stir with a whisk so that it was all combined together. We're going to go ahead and put that into our mix. We're going to get that just going. Start on slow so you don't get flour everywhere. I'm going to put it up to medium just for a few seconds. And now I'm going to add our nuts and our chocolate chips. We're just going to do like 15 seconds here. Get this off of our paddle. Now my oven is heated to 375, which is what we want to bake our cookies on. One more tip here is that I like to give my cookie dough a stir manually once it's come off of the stand mixer, just to make sure there's no pockets of flour in the bottom. And if there are, just give it a nice stir in. I actually don't have any here. Almost always I do. So, okay. So now we're going to pan up, and that is our next couple of tips. Before we get to scooping our cookies, I want to do this week's shout out to my pal Ronan. Hey Ronan, I hope that this summer I can go crabbing with you and Ingrid again. Hope you're having a great week. My tips for panning up. First of all, I like to cook on parchment paper. You can find this pretty cheaply online on Amazon or King Arthur Flour. One thing to note about this, unless your parchment paper gets really burnt because you're in the oven at high temperatures, or really messy because you've put like something with barbecue sauce on it, you can reuse these parchment pieces several times. You can flip them over. So when I'm doing a big day of cooking making, especially around the holidays, I'll reuse my parchment a bunch to get more mileage out of it. The other thing is I love to scoop my cookie dough using disher scoops. If you read any of my blog, you know these are one of my favorite tools in the kitchen, especially with scooping cookies and batters. And I have 3 different sizes. So like around the holidays when I want to share a lot of cookies, I'll use this little tablespoon scoop. But recently I've been really wanting a giant tea saucer size cookie to get me through whatever we're going through right now. So that's what I'm going to use. And I'm going to actually only bake up 6 of these because I have another tip for you. If you don't want to eat all of these cookies all at once, you can freeze them. I'm going to show you how to do that. But first, let's get 6 of these going. These are going to spread pretty well. So I want to give them good amounts of space. I'm going to get these in the oven. They're going to take about 10 to 11 minutes. They're going to be just looking underdone in the center, and that's going to be perfect. So let's get them cooking. Okay, to freeze your cookie dough, which I've really loved having frozen cookie dough in the refrigerator or in the freezer at all times so that we can have hot, fresh cookies anytime we want, but we're not overindulging all at one time. Because I don't really have an office to share with, we're not really getting together with people at the moment, this is a really key tip. Okay, so I have the rest of my dough scooped onto this 6 sheet pan. I'm going to put this in the freezer until they're hardened, and then I'm going to transfer them to a Ziploc bag. And on that Ziploc bag, I'm going to put the name of the cookie, the temperature of the oven, and how long they should bake for. Let's check our cookies. Oh, they look perfect. So as you can see, they're nice and golden brown around the edges, but just in the middle, they look underdone. But those are going to still continue to bake a little bit on the pan. I did want to show you this tip. Now, these actually shaped up pretty nicely, but sometimes you get a really runny cookie. And what I've found is that when they're really hot out of the oven, you can just use a metal spatula and kind of push them back into shape. Um, and what I like about this too is you have this really extra crinkly outside along with that perfectly round shape. So I'm probably going to fix these just a little bit, and then we have to let them cool. Okay, it's been about 15 minutes. I couldn't wait 20, but these look cool enough. And let me tell you, this looks pretty near perfect to me. It is nice and chunky and craggly, perfectly round. Let's take a bite. This is definitely as close to perfect as it gets for me. Super chewy, but still a little warm, which is always nice. So many nutty, toasty chunks in there. I love this cookie. I also really love the almond extract. I know a lot of times on TV you will see kind of snarky chefs turning their nose down at almond extract, but I don't know. It adds a nice extra nutty flavor to the cookie. And I don't think it's overwhelming. But then again, I love almond flavored anything. Anyway, I hope you try this recipe and I hope you like it as much as I do. And if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And click subscribe and that little bell button to be alerted when I launch a new video. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Now go have some fun in the kitchen and see if this is the perfect chocolate chip cookie for you.